Engineering teams push code every week, launching dozens of new features a quarter. It is a constant cycle of development. Yet, when leadership reviews the earnings report, profit margins remain flat, and enterprise value hasn't moved. The volume of work is high, but the impact is zero. Inside the application, this disconnect creates the Vegas effect. The interface becomes a noisy environment where isolated features compete for the user's attention. There is no cohesive logic tying the experience together, only a collection of disparate bets. This happens when leadership equates a quantitative target, like increase revenue by 20%, with a strategy. A target is a metric to track. It provides a destination, but offers no guidance on the choices required to reach it. Difficulty in prioritization is rarely an execution failure. It is a structural void. The bridge between the corporate mission and the developers writing the code has collapsed. To fill that void, organizations rely on a mental model known as the strategy stack. It is a logical hierarchy that replaces fragmented roadmaps with a single, unified architecture. The stack is built from 5 distinct layers: company, business, product, platform, and execution. This architecture operates on a rule of cascading dependencies. Each tier acts as a strict prerequisite for the layer below it. You cannot formulate a valid product strategy if the business strategy above it remains undefined. When any single layer is vague or ignored, the structure breaks. Subsequent layers lose their grounding, leading to high-cost guesswork. The bedrock of this architecture is company strategy. This is the overarching logical plan required to achieve the corporate mission, independent of aspirational marketing language. Defining this layer requires looking past industry folklore. Leaders apply first principles thinking to isolate the absolute structural truths of their market, the actual physics of the problem they are trying to solve. To structure those truths, management theorist Richard Rumelt uses a framework called the kernel. It begins with a diagnosis of the market landscape and the specific challenges threatening the company. That diagnosis dictates a guiding policy, the approach chosen to overcome the obstacles. Finally, the policy is translated into a set of coherent actions that direct resource allocation. A company strategy lacking this 3-part kernel is an empty statement. Without a diagnosis, a policy, and coherent actions, leadership has only published a wish list. Below the corporate kernel sits business strategy. This is the financial engine that ensures corporate survival and sets the competitive posture. Operating at this layer forces executives to confront the playing to win matrix. They must make 2 explicit choices: precisely where the company will play and exactly how it intends to win in that specific arena. Choosing an economic model dictates every downstream design choice. If a company targets cost leadership through operational efficiency, its supply chain, store layouts, and product packaging must prioritize logistics over luxury. This creates trade-offs. Choosing one specific customer segment inherently requires abandoning others. A business strategy that attempts to capture every demographic usually fails to capture any. These choices establish strict economic boundaries. They prevent downstream product teams from building features that the target market is unwilling to pay for. The product layer operates as the translator. It converts those abstract business economics into tangible user experiences. Former Netflix executive Gibson Biddle codified this translation through the DHM model. The first mandate is straightforward. The product must delight the customer by solving a real problem. But delight is easily mimicked by competitors. The second mandate requires the solution to be hard to copy. This means engineering defensive moats through unique brand positioning, network effects, or proprietary technology. The final mandate secures the company's future. The product must be margin-enhancing. It has to generate the cash flow required to fuel future innovation and return shareholder value. In the early 2000s, delivering physical media delighted users, but it carried high variable logistics costs. Shifting to digital streaming required massive upfront capital, but once the infrastructure was built, the marginal cost of delivering content dropped significantly, satisfying all 3 DHM mandates. If a team optimizes purely for customer delight without locking in margin enhancers, they have built a commodity that is easily replaced by a more profitable competitor. For companies that achieve scale, the architecture must evolve. The linear product pipeline expands outward into an interconnected ecosystem network. Platform strategy is the orchestration of a multi-sided network. Instead of the company building every feature, third-party producers and consumers co-create value on top of a shared infrastructure. This relies on network effects rather than standard operational flywheels. As each new participant joins the platform, the ecosystem becomes more valuable to every user. Successful execution requires an API-first architecture. The core product ceases to be a standalone tool and becomes the foundation for external developers to build entirely new businesses. Apple executed this by opening its iOS platform to external builders. Today, with over 2 million apps in the App Store, the hardware is no longer just a device. It is the entry point to a network that becomes more difficult to abandon with every app installed. Platform strategy shifts the burden of innovation off the internal payroll. It turns external developers into a structural barrier that is difficult for competitors to breach. The final layer is execution. Strategy remains theoretical until financial capital and engineering hours are actually spent. To bypass project-by-project lobbying, executives deploy the strategic buckets method. This is a top-down mechanism designed to enforce alignment across the portfolio. Capital is allocated to specific categories, like core, adjacent, and disruptive, based strictly on the business strategy mandates. This allocation happens before a single feature is discussed. If a proposed project exceeds its bucket's funding, it is rejected. The product roadmap and quarterly OKRs are the final output of this constrained system. They are the artifacts of a resolved debate, not the starting point for a new negotiation. A product roadmap generated from bottom-up requests, operating without the constraints of strategic buckets, is a political wish list. It is an exercise in appeasing stakeholders, rather than an execution plan. When constructed, this architecture replaces isolated goals with organizational alignment. The flow of definition cascades top-down, providing constraints to the layers beneath, ensuring daily tasks serve the corporate mission. Simultaneously, evaluation moves bottom-up. Real-world metrics rise back through the stack, validating higher-level assumptions. Companies that skip layers within this stack pay a severe coordination tax. The resulting friction causes massive wasted capital, stalled shipping schedules, and completely flat growth. Product leaders maintain organizational value by continuously auditing this architecture, ensuring every daily task defends the core business hypothesis.